Talent is something you look for. In other words, you can do anything you're willing to work at it. Robert Ross, the quiet man with the soft voice, the happy brushstrokes, and the famous line about happy little trees. He was more than just a painter for many people around the world. He brought peace, happiness, and quiet strength. What if the picture we all love wasn't really what it seemed like? Fans thought Bob Ross lived the peaceful life he showed on TV for many years. But there was a much more complicated world behind the easel, one with buried family fights, battles, and power plays that have been going on for years. Steve Ross, his only son, has been quiet until now. Steve has finally broken his quiet at age 58. What he says questions the legacy that a lot of people care about. Why did Bob Ross's family lose control of his name? Why did Steve stop being known to the public after his dad died? Who really made money off of Bob Ross's fame? After finally telling the truth, Steve Ross, you will question everything you thought you knew about the man behind the paint. From Master Sergeant to the joy of drawing in 1983. Robert Norman Ross was born Bob Ross on October 29, 1942 in Daytona Beach, Florida. He would go on to become a beloved figure in American society, known for his soft voice, good nature, and peaceful scenery paintings, as well as some other things. To do this, we need to make very important choices. We'll begin in the distance. His path to becoming a societal icon, on the other hand, was not easy. In fact, Bob Ross was a man shaped by military order and the structure of service life long before he got paid to paint. In his early years, he didn't show much of an interest in becoming an artist. Few people would have thought that the quiet boy from Florida would go on to inspire millions of people through art and TV. Ross made a big choice in 1961 when he was only 18 years old that would affect the next 20 years of his life. He joined the Air Force of the United States. Ross probably wanted stability, structure, and a clear way forward when he joined the military at such a young age. This was something that a lot of young Americans did at that time. As a medical records technician, his first job in the Air Force needed him to pay close attention to details, be organized, and be exact. People have noticed how dedicated and strong he was over the years. Ross stuck with it and worked hard, and he finally rose through the ranks to become a Master Sergeant. After becoming a Master Sergeant, Ross was in charge of other people. His military job needed him to be firm and commanding, which was different from the gentle, soft-spoken persona we came to associate with him. He later said that part of his job was to be tough on people, which is something he would try to stop doing. Giving orders and being in charge shaped his professional personality, but it also made him understand that he wanted a different, calmer way of life. In a strange way, the things that made him a good military leader would finally push him toward a more creative and introspective path. Ross was stationed in Alaska in the 1970s, and that's where things started to change. He found motivation in the vast, untouched landscapes and dramatic natural scenery that were all around him. Alaska's Grand Ypres, the snowy mountains, calm lakes, and never-ending woods were more than just a background. They sparked a new generation of artists. Ross learned how to paint with oil for the first time in this snowy, remote place. What started out as a hobby to take his mind off the stresses of being in the service quickly turned into a dream that would shape his future. Ross started to work on a way to paint that was quick, effective, and beautiful to look at. This made it possible for him to finish whole scenes in one sitting, which worked for him and his plan. As Ross's interest grew, he looked for ways to get better by watching others. He learned from Bill Alexander, a German painter and host of the TV show The Magic of Oil Painting. Good news, that is what we need to do. I need to put myself in that huge bubble. Alexander was famous for using the wet-on-wet method, in which new paint is put on top of layers that are still wet. This method not only saved time but also made beautiful effects. Ross started to change this method to make it fit his own way. He liked Alexander's work on TV and the way he taught, but he also had an idea for how he could make painting even easier for regular people to do. Ross learned the wet-on-wet style quickly and got better at painting quickly. Not only was the method itself unique, but so was the mindset that went along with it. He thought everyone should be able to enjoy art. It didn't have to be limited to museums or work that was done by trained workers only. He thought that anyone could learn to paint if they were given the right help and support. He kept thinking about this idea, and it led to the idea for his future TV show. Bob Ross left the Air Force in 1981, after 20 years of service, to follow his interest full-time. Ross took a big risk when he quit his job as a soldier after a long and safe career. He decided to focus on art instead. It was a risky and unusual move, but it would define his reputation in the end. He was determined to share what made him happy and calm with everyone. With more experience, a clear way of talking to people, and a strong desire to teach, TV was the next logical step for him. The Joy of Painting first aired on PBS just 2 years later, in 1983. The show started out small. The structure was easy to understand. There was Ross at an easel painting a scene from beginning to end in less than 30 minutes. But people were interested right away, not just because of his skill but also because of the way he spoke, It felt close and personal because of his soft voice, comforting tone, and famous sayings like happy little trees and we don't make mistakes, just happy accidents. Looking at Bob Ross paint wasn't just a way to learn how to paint, it was about taking things slowly, enjoying how simple they are, and discovering joy in making things. As the show went on, it started to reach a lot of different kinds of people. Ross's calm and friendly personality brought comfort and ideas to kids, adults, seniors, and even people who weren't interested in art. It wasn't just a lesson in the joy of painting. An era of peace came into being for many. In other words, you can do anything you're willing to work at it, and this is no different. Bob Ross did more than just paint. He was a sign of peace, talent, and kindness. Bob Ross supposedly took advantage of his legacy against his wishes. Bob Ross's story is one of change, inspiration, and an amazing legacy that has touched millions of people around the world. Ross had a very different life before he became the kind, soft-spoken painter we all know and respect. His life was shaped by discipline, structure, and leadership. As a master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. In his early years in the military, he had to be tough and authoritative, which was very different from the calm, reassuring personality he would later show on TV. Still, it was this one-of-a-kind mix of traits, discipline matched by kindness, that made him who he was in the end. Ross's life was centered around his deep love of art and his earnest desire to share that love with others, making painting easy and fun for everyone. He thought that anyone could paint something lovely with a brush, and his work gave a lot of people the motivation to do the same. There is a more complicated story behind the peaceful and kind Bob Ross that we saw on TV. It is one that has been filled with problems and challenges since his death, showing how complicated fame and legacy can be. This more interesting part of Bob Ross's life was shown on Netflix in 2021 in the documentary Bob Ross: Happy Accidents, Betrayal and Greed. The movie looked at the moral and legal problems that have come up with how Ross's legacy has been managed since he died in 1995. It looked into how Bob Ross's name, image, and art have been licensed, sold, and managed, which brought up important questions about who really owns this famous artist's legacy. The program was mostly about Bob Ross Inc., the business that Annette and Walt Kowalski started together. These two business partners helped Ross get his TV job off the ground and built a brand around his image. But the movie makes it seem like the fact that they ran the company after Ross died caused a lot of problems and disagreements. The documentary says that the Kowalskis took over Bob Ross's work in ways that didn't fully respect Ross's own wishes or intentions. Ross was known for being calm, humble, and honest in both painting and teaching. The movie says that the company put making money first, aggressively cashing in on Ross's image and work in ways that seemed to put his values second. Some people say that this use of his image and works without honoring the spirit of kindness and openness that Ross pushed during his lifetime is wrong. This show about Bob Ross Inc. started a larger talk about what happens to the legacy of famous people who are loved by many people after they die. In this case, it showed how hard and sometimes controversial it can be to handle an artist's name and intellectual property, especially when money is involved. The documentary also showed Bob Ross's family, including his son Steve Ross. God bless my son Steve, and thanks for watching. Have a nice trip. Was not involved in most of the choices that affected how his name, likeness, and art were used. This exclusion caused problems in the family and brought up tough questions about who really benefits from Bob Ross's huge and ongoing fame today. This story has a sad feel to it. On the one hand, Bob Ross's soothing voice, gentle way of teaching, and contagious love of painting continue to encourage artists and fans all over the world. His famous sayings like happy little trees and we don't make mistakes, just happy accidents have become important parts of culture and stand for kindness, creativity, and the joy of art. His work has not only survived but grown on digital platforms and social media where millions of people watch his shows and tutorials to relax, find inspiration, and feel better. Many people still find peace and motivation in Bob Ross's presence in a world that is often very chaotic. But seeing what goes on behind the scenes shows us that the business of fame and memory isn't always as simple and peaceful as it seems on screen. It is shown in the Netflix program how the business side of art and entertainment can sometimes take precedence over the artist's own values and goals. People who see it are asked to think deeply about how to handle and protect legacies and what it really means to honor the spirit of someone whose work has affected so many people. New Netflix documentary called Bob Ross: Happy Accidents talks about the end of more than 400 episodes of The Joy of Painting and co-founding Bob Ross Inc. after the scandals that the documentary brought to light. The documentary also talks about the ongoing discussions about Ross's impact. It's important to think about Bob Ross's amazing life as an artist and cultural figure in the 1980s and early 1990s. During this time, Bob Ross went from being an Air Force Master Sergeant and an avid painter to a true culture icon. His groundbreaking TV shows and entrepreneurial spirit touched the lives of millions of people. Beginning in 1983, PBS showed The Joy of Painting, which was the start of a new period in Bob Ross's life. The popular show was made by Bob Ross over the course of more than 10 years from 1983 to 1994. Ross would stand in front of his easel and show people how to paint peaceful landscapes step by step in less than 30 minutes. It wasn't just Ross's skill with the brush that made joy of painting stand out, it was also his calm demeanor, reassuring voice and desire for people to see painting as a fun and easy exercise, rather than a difficult or exclusive art form. By making so many episodes, more than 400 in total, Bob Ross not only showed that he was very productive, but also that he was very dedicated to his goal of teaching art to everyone. Each episode showed his unique style. He used the wet-on-wet oil painting method he learned in Alaska to paint everything from the happy little trees to the snowy mountains and lakes that sparkled in the light. He was able to work quickly and efficiently with this method, which made it great for TV, where the whole painting was finished during the show's runtime. Bob Ross became more than just a TV host as the show got more famous. People saw him as a culture icon because of how calm and positive he was. Public awareness of his picture and words spread, and he gained devoted followers from outside of art circles. He made art that made people who had never thought of themselves as artists feel better, and gave them ideas. Many people feel stuck when they try to paint or express themselves creatively, but support helped get rid of those blocks. During the height of his work, Bob Ross also took steps to keep his brand safe and grow it. He started Bob Ross Inc. with Annette and Walt Kowalski so that the business side of his work could be better managed. The business was mostly about promoting the Bob Ross name and selling painting supplies, how-to books and other items that went with the show's message. Bob Ross wanted to make painting easy for everyone by showing it on TV and giving people the tools and information they needed to practice and improve their own skills at home. Making Bob Ross Inc. was a very important step. This gave Ross a way to reach more people outside of TV by selling branded paints, brushes, canvases, and how-to books. There is a community around the Bob Ross brand thanks to these goods. Fans and aspiring painters could connect with the artist's ideas and methods in a real way. As the show became more popular, so did the business side of the brand. This made Bob Ross even more a part of pop culture in the 1980s. Despite being very famous and having a big effect on culture, The Joy of Painting went off the air in 1994. The last episode aired that year, marking the end of an important part of Bob Ross's work. Because it ran for 11 years and had hundreds of episodes, the show became a mainstay on public television and an example to many. There was still a lot of Bob Ross's impact after the show ended. There were, however, reruns of the episodes, and later they were brought back to life on digital platforms, introducing Bob Ross to new fans long after the original broadcast stopped. The real story behind Bob Ross's money. In the 1980s and 1990s, Bob Ross became a cultural hero, known all over the world for his calm personality and positive approach to painting. However, many people still have the wrong idea about how much money he has. There are a lot of people who think that Ross would naturally be very successful financially because he is so famous and well known. The truth, on the other hand, is very different and much more complicated. Bob Ross did not die rich, even though his book The Joy of Painting is very famous, and there is a lot of merchandise with his name and picture on it. This surprising fact shows a big difference between how people think about fame, business, and managing a legacy, and how people really live their lives. During his whole life, Bob Ross was more interested in his art and teaching than in getting rich. The money side of his work wasn't always the most important thing to him because he was kind and humble. He did help Annette and Walt Kowalski start Bob Ross Inc. to promote his brand and sell painting materials, but the company gained a lot more control over the brand's money-making after he died. It wasn't until long after Bob Ross's death in 1995 that products, licensing, and branding started making money for him. His likely financial success was due to the continued popularity of his TV shows, the continued sales of branded painting materials, and the widespread use of his image in many different products. The brand that Bob Ross helped build grew into a strong and profitable business that reached new audiences around the world through products, streaming services, and syndication. But Ross's increased wealth did not go to his heirs or his family, even though his business empire grew. Bob Ross Inc. and its owners were in charge of the income instead. Some of the people close to him are disappointed and angry about this fact. A lot of fans are shocked to learn that the person who brought so much happiness and comfort to so many people did not personally get as much money as one might think. Part of the reason for this misunderstanding is the way the Bob Ross brand is promoted these days. Since his picture is on t-shirts, mugs, digital content, and licensed goods, it's natural to think that Bob Ross, or at least his family, would have made a lot of money from having such a well-known and loved character. But the truth is that the man who made the money doesn't really have much to do with his business legacy. Ross did not die rich, which has something to do with how brand management and intellectual property rights work in situations like his. It can be hard to figure out who owns an artist's name, image, and work when they become a brand. In the case of Bob Ross, these rights were held by the company he started with, the Kowalskis. Because of this deal, Bob Ross was the face and creative force behind the brand, but he did not have full power over how his work was used for business purposes.
After he died, these assets were managed and made money from by the company, not his family. Bob Ross hid the fact that he had cancer, which can kill you. Bob Ross was told he had lymphoma in the early 1990s. Lymphoma is a dangerous form of cancer that affects the lymphatic system, which is part of the body's immune system. This diagnosis came at a very important and difficult time in his life, one that would have a big effect on both his personal health and his work. Ross made the choice to keep working, even though he was very sick. He was committed to his job as the calm and reassuring host of The Joy of Painting. He never stopped making art, teaching and moving people all over the world. To everyone's surprise, Ross decided to keep his illness mostly private, keeping his fans and the public from realizing how bad his health was getting until he died. Ross had lymphoma, a type of cancer that spreads quickly and can make it hard to do things. It has an effect on the lymphatic system, which is very important for fighting off sickness and illness, and needs very serious medical care. It would have been very hard for someone like Bob Ross to tell everyone about his condition because his whole public image was based on being calm, positive, and reassuring through his voice and manner. The kind, upbeat person who told people to enjoy life's little pleasures may have been afraid that talking about his own problems would ruin the calm and positive mood he worked so hard to create. But Bob Ross decided to focus on what was most important to him, his art and the people who liked it. He kept making episodes about the joy of painting and talking to his viewers with the same warmth and kindness. He didn't let his illness get in the way of the joy he wanted to share. The fact that he chose to hide his illness says a lot about who he is. It shows a man who really wanted to make other people happy and inspired. Even though he was going through a hard and painful fight himself, he didn't want to bring it up in front of the crowd or let his illness ruin the legacy he had worked so hard to create. This choice shows a quiet strength and resilience, and it shows that he wanted to be known not for his health problems, but for the creativity and peace he shared so freely. In the early 1990s, Ross's health slowly got worse, but his commitment to his work never wavered. Even though he had lymphoma, he continued to film episodes and teach painting. This shows how skilled and dedicated he was. Many people admired him even more, not just as an artist or TV host, but also as a person who dealt with hardships with grace. For watchers, he stayed the same kind, reassuring figure. His soft voice and steady brushstrokes made them feel calm and at ease. Behind the scenes, though, Bob Ross was bravely fighting a dangerous illness that could have killed him. Most of his viewers didn't know this at the time. Bob Ross's choice to keep his cancer diagnosis mostly out of the public eye has had a big impact on how many people remember him today. Ross decided to keep his private health separate from his public persona, unlike many celebrities who talk about their illness in order to raise awareness or connect with fans. This line kept the joy of art from becoming a harsh reminder of sickness and death, keeping it a place of peace and hope for viewers. His privacy helped keep the show's positive mood, so viewers could focus on the fun of creativity instead of the sad truth of his sickness. Sadly, cancer did kill her in the end. When Bob Ross died in 1995, it was the end of an amazing life and work. Many people who had only seen him on TV, where he was calm and positive, were shocked when he died. A lot of Ross's fans felt very sad about his death because they had come to link him with comfort, hope, and artistic support. Many people didn't know the truth about his illness and the private fight he fought until after he died. This gave his story a new twist. Steve Ross, Bob Ross's son, speaks out at age 58. As soon as Bob Ross died in 1995, the story of his impact became much more complicated, and sometimes very unpleasant. There was a legal and emotional fight over who owned the rights to his name, image, and the huge amount of goodwill he had built up over decades. He used to be a beloved and peaceful TV character. Another big problem that has been going on for a long time is the ownership disagreement between Bob Ross Inc., the company co-founded by Annette and Walt Kowalski, who had been business partners with Ross for a long time and were related to Bob Ross. It wasn't just about money in this argument. It had a big impact on how Bob Ross's legacy would be used, promoted, and recognized by people in the future. The main person in this fight is Steve Ross, Bob Ross's son. Steve has talked more and more about his time working for Bob Ross Inc. over the years, expressing his anger at how the company manages his father's brand. Steve says that even though he was his father's straight biological heir, he wasn't included in most of the decisions that were made, and wasn't allowed to own or make money from the rights to his name and image.